Hi, everyone, and welcome to our panel. Before we begin, I want to ask everyone here a question. We're going to do a little bit of a poll. Let me take you back in time to February 2016. So rewind back in time with me 1 year. And you can answer this question with your thumb. How much did you predict the state of our political discourse today? Thumbs up if you predicted it. Thumbs down if you're maybe a little surprised, maybe a little in denial. Yeah. So I can see a lot of us are a little bit surprised, right? Drop down now into your body in the present moment, here in your seat. What's one word that captures how you feel about the state of our political discourse, how we talk to each other, the tone of the conversation? Just think about that for a second. Now I'd like you to fast forward in time. 1 year from now, February 2018. We're back here at Wisdom 2.0, 12 months have passed. Worst case scenario, we're maybe even more divided, more siloed. Best case scenario, more people are getting involved. People are listening. People are inquiring. Imagine what your best case scenario would be for 2018. What's your best case scenario? Well, we have 4 wonderful panelists here who are going to help us think through how to take action and practice compassion towards that best case scenario. So Josh, let's begin with you. Reflecting on your own leadership, what are you personally taking away and learning?
Yeah, so it's a true pleasure to be here. We were just chatting right before about this specific venue. And for those of you that don't know, this actually used to be the Exploratorium, where as a child growing up in the Bay Area, I would come to discover and learn about science. There's a beauty and symmetry to today it being a place to learn about a different part of the brain, perhaps a less logical part, but one that is just as meaningful. My remarks are going to be really framed around this idea of how much of a privilege we have here and how grateful I am to use this platform. I run a company with 400 people. We have 40,000 small businesses using Gusto across the country. But this privilege, this responsibility to actually have an opinion and actually not just get caught up in political ideology debates, but what does it mean to follow your core values? And for that, I'm going to give a little bit of personal background about myself. Born and raised here, but my parents are not from here. My mother is from Bolivia, came to the US when she was 18 to learn a new language, create a new life. My father is from a small steel town outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Also, both my mother and father were the first in their families to go to college, came to San Francisco, and became teachers. My dad was a high school teacher in San Francisco and then taught at San Quentin Prison for 10 years. And so I think of this discussion around entrepreneurship, which relates to me, and also this idea of what role technology has to play, technology community, in these broader discussions as framed against that backdrop, which is just how grateful I am for their sacrifice and for what they did to give me this opportunity to share my voice, share my opinion, kind of enable my team to go take action. So when some of the news happened around something that I would deem not a political topic, but a human topic around immigration, we were excited as a company to take action. We have a program to help folks donate from their pay stubs. So think of, again, the power of recurring donations to nonprofits. So we actually gave all 40,000 companies on Gusto a call to action, a reminder that that was there, but also that we would match any donation to the ACLU across those entire companies. And what was really exciting about it, and I think this is what we're going to dive into, was that a debate or discussion inside the company? I think growing up and being part of the Silicon Valley community, going to Stanford, studying engineering, there's a lot of different stereotypes you can associate with my background. It's fascinating how it becomes this almost discussion debate when you frame it as there are absolutely political topics where we want to have an inclusive environment, welcome all perspectives, but then there's a separate discussion around what are your core values and what is a human right. And I think that's helped us at least navigate that journey in terms of when it's in this bucket, then hell yeah, heck yeah, we're going to have an opinion and a point of view. Otherwise, what do we stand for? So,
thank you. Great. Wonderful. Lainey, I want to ask you a question next. How are you creating spaces to hold discussions about our democracy, amongst people who hold differing views?
Sure, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. My organization, Coro, was actually founded here in San Francisco in the 40s by actually two Republicans who were coming out of World War II and were really concerned that we would not have a thriving democracy moving forward. And so what they did was they said, you know what we need to do? We need to help people learn how to work better across differences. And for 75 years, we've been running experiential civic leadership programs that help people work and lead across differences. So I feel really privileged to be doing the work of creating those spaces right now. But I think it's really tricky because we don't have a lot of examples right now, right, of people working well and people working collaboratively across differences. In a thriving democracy, you'd think that would happen in Congress or in City Hall, and we don't have those examples. And so it leaves all of us, I think, kind of grasping and fumbling for how do we actually make those connections. You know, I personally, I've got a cousin in northern Idaho, and when I was on Facebook posting my pictures, right, of me walking by the White House wearing my pink hat at the Women's March, she was posting pictures of the trash that the marchers left, right? And writing things like, shame on those women. And it was a really profound moment for me because I thought, all right, I have a choice here. I can fight. I can ignore, and maybe some of you know what I'm talking about here, or I can actually choose to create, right? I can choose to actually use this as an opportunity to consciously try to create some kind of connection. So I sent her a note and I said, hey, you know, can I ask you some questions and can you ask me some questions, and let's have the goal be to try to seek to understand each other, because I live in a bubble here in San Francisco, and I think, I don't want to assume, but I think you kind of live in a bubble in northern Idaho. Can we open the floor for conversation? And she said yes. And then she sent me a picture of her chickens. And I said, hey, my kids are going to love these pictures of your chickens. And I think that that's how, kind of on an individual level, right, this kind of bridge building starts to happen. You have to have permission, so you have to be brave and ask for permission to kind of seek to understand. And then you've got to have the chickens, right? You've got to have some kind of commonality, right, that's going to hold together, and then you can build on the chickens, right? Like, I don't think I'm going to convert her to my perspective and vice versa, but at least we've got the chickens to start the conversation. You know, and then I think on an organizational level, it's also really challenging too, because we don't give people a lot of spaces to work collaboratively and to practice that, right? It's an art. And then we just throw them into situations and expect them to work collaboratively, and it's really a challenge. I think, you know, for us, we're really focused right now as an organization on thinking about this concept of transpartisan values. So what are things that, you know, go beyond our individual parties, that are values that we hold in service of a thriving democracy, right? And like, what are those? And I think, you know, as an organization, we think right now engagement is one of those. A thriving democracy needs people who are going to be involved and step up. And so we're looking at how can we create spaces that are transpartisan to help people learn how to navigate, how to actually like plug in and get engaged.
Wonderful. That's awesome. Okay.
I was going to add a couple more suggestions, and then we can keep going on. But to the extent people want more tactical advice as well as that, two things we do, and feel free to mimic. I think Silicon Valley can be an echo chamber at times, and I love being here, but it's great to get out. If you're not from here, thank you for visiting, but also bring some of these lessons to other parts of the country and the world. So Augusta, we give everyone on their one-year anniversary a free plane ticket anywhere in the world to enable them to go travel, explore. Kind of was something we did that felt very core to our values. And then two is next month I'm doing a road trip cross-country, coast to coast for 12 days. I think there's a ton of value to physical connection with these communities as well. And if folks want to join or come or hear more about that or follow our playbook, please feel free to let me know.
So Sharon and Rhonda, I now want to turn towards our mindfulness practitioners. I want to say experts, but it feels like that's not the right word. I love talking with you both on the phone and hearing how you're bringing compassion, self-compassion, and just awareness practices to your work. And I'd love to hear from the two of you how you're bringing that, how you're thinking through that as we go into 2018.
All right, you go first.
Okay. Well, thank you. I, as was mentioned, I teach law school at the University of San Francisco, and so I'll speak a little bit about some of the ways that I've been bringing these practices to law students. These are, so here in San Francisco, my students are from a range of different backgrounds, just like the citizens of this city. Very international, very recent immigrants. Many are first-generation college students and certainly professional students. And many of them are really, really suffering right now because either they themselves or people they love and are close to are feeling the pressure of some of the threatened and real changes. The Muslim ban, though it's been stayed, it's still in progress. Some version of it will happen. The refugee ban. Remember, there's those two different bans. I think we sometimes only hear about it as one or the other, but both of these, as just one example, threatened rights to LGBTQ communities. These are all bringing a heightened sense of concern to all our students. So I literally bring compassion practices into the classroom. I literally co-created a class several years ago called Contemplative Lawyering, where we are focusing students on developing a values-based approach to their own identities as lawyers, but doing so through the lens and practices of contemplation and meditation, so for themselves and for others. And I feel like I have to say that in this particular space right now, I appreciated you mentioned it was an exploratorium. When I first walked in here, the first thing I thought is, it's very womb-like, right? It feels like a womb in this space, right? And I mentioned that because one of my favorite writers about education theory for freedom and for justice, Paulo Freire, in one of his books, he mentioned that liberation is like childbirth, and it's a painful one. And I feel like my students from these various different backgrounds struggling together to define justice in a way that includes everybody and to bring us an inner dimension to their work and a compassionate dimension to their work, they see that we are going through something very painful together. So they are very, very, very open to sitting with compassion. The Christian Neff and other scientists of compassion, I do a lot of research-based grounding for my students, so they know that we're not just pulling fluff and woohoo into the classroom. It's grounded in research. But when they hear about it and then begin to experience it, they see the way it can assist them, help them in moving through these binary ways of thinking about the world, right? I'm documented, I'm not. I'm a citizen, I'm not. I'm black, I'm white. I'm a male, I'm female. They are way ahead of many of us, I'll have to say, in realizing what some of us get through our contemplative practice, which is an awareness of, the falsity of binary thinking, right? We move our way into wholeness. And so, but that doesn't mean, though, that these concepts have no meaning or cannot be useful in political and public strategies and movements for justice. So again, that's not just destabilizing binary thinking, but also holding paradox. It's both and. It's both, we have these identities, we use them to help politically motivate and organize struggle, but our compassion practices help us feel our way into doing so in ways that don't re-wound and don't mimic the patterns of division that we've seen in our pasts. So that's kind of what we've been working on, and I've seen that in ways that encourage me. So I want to share that for the encouragement of it. Thank you.
Well, I have been teaching mindfulness for a very long time. It's set up on the screen, Sharon Salzberg, mindfulness teacher. So I've been teaching for well over 40 years now. And in addition to that, I've taught a tremendous amount of loving kindness meditation and compassion meditation, maybe even more so that. And one thing I've said through these decades is I so want love and compassion to be part of the dialogue. I want it part of the conversation, whatever we're talking about. Can it be part of the conversation? Because my concern and my observation actually is that for many of us, those qualities have gotten degraded in a sense, so that we feel that means being weak or mushy or saccharine and not taking a stand and somehow being obsequious and too nice, really. And I think, of course, we miss the potential power and strength, and all that can come from really what is a tremendous force. And I think about these times and different times in my life where I've kind of had to say to myself, do you still believe that? Like, do you still believe what you've been saying all these years and writing all these years? And I go, oh, I don't know, let me think and feel and look. And I keep coming out like, wow, yeah, I do. Wow, look at that. I think of, I had this experience many years ago where I got the chance to spend a day with this man named Miles Horton, who had started this place called the Highlander Folk School, which was a place in Tennessee where many, many people trained, early civil rights leaders and very early environmental leaders. And it was a very controversial place because it was racially integrated. It was in Tennessee, and they were brought to trial, and all kinds of things happened to them. And somehow he was in Massachusetts, and we got to spend a day together. And he asked me what I did, so I said I taught meditation, which didn't seem to impress him very much. But then I asked him, I said, what do you do? Like, you must do something, because it's so much pressure and so much hatred coming towards you. And, I said, what do you do? And he said, I look at the mountains. I just go, I sit outside, I look at the mountains. And then we started talking about loving kindness practice, because it was so much my thing. And he said, oh, Martin Luther King Jr., Marty used to say to me, you've got to love everybody. And I used to say, no, I don't. He used to say, I'm only going to love the people who deserve to be loved. And he said, Marty would laugh and say, no, you got to love everybody. And I don't often actually tell that story, and the few times I have, mostly the comment coming back is, we'll see what happened to him, as though there were cause and effect there. As though if Martin Luther King Jr. had been hateful and bitter and enraged, he would have been better off and safe somehow. And that kind of link, I think, is something that we can often fall into. So I've really actually appreciated very much in this particular session that distinction. There's a way in which I think we feel we do need to open. We need to recognize ourselves in one another. We need to find the ways in which perhaps we have some similar values, or we can go on in a more together fashion. And we need to find the ways in which we really feel firmly not all views are equal. We don't live in a morally relativistic world, actually. Some actions are extremely harmful. They're devastating to others. And we need to, in a different way, I think, find the energy to really, stand up for saying that's wrong, and I'm going to do what I can to make it different.
Okay, great. Did anyone else want to add to Sharon's comment? Yeah.
You're nodding there.
Yeah, I'm nodding so much because the impetus to bring love to the fore is very, very resonant with me as well. And I really have always admired your work and your teaching, largely because it has given me permission to say, yes, love matters. And indeed, there are so many different ways that I think for students who are learning, to think critically, which is such an important skill. And we think about leadership in this time. I think all of us are looking at ways that we can help do what we can to help people heighten their capacity to think critically. And I use the word thinking constructively as well, to sort of heighten that capacity of critical thinking that's about listening to the perspectives of others with some respect, appreciation, even while we evaluate and discern whether or not all views, are equally valuable. And we know they're not. You're absolutely right. But first, to open up to the fact that we are all in these different positions and standpoints, and therefore we really need each other to really learn and have a broad perspective on truth, on the way forward. And so when I speak about the value of diversity and inclusion, it's really about the value of getting it right. Getting it right. We heard from our panelists, the very first panelists on technology, all of the tremendous ways that technology is actually impacting all of us. Is everybody involved in the conversation about what that technology is and what it should do? wouldn't we be better off if a broad cross-section of our beautiful world, well, those people, all of us were in some way in those conversations. So I really do feel having the capacity for that is difficult because we weren't trained for that. As you say, we don't have models for that. Yeah. So having love and having compassion as a core piece of it, not something fluffy, but what it takes to do connection in the 21st century under these times. I just feel like it's a profound intervention. It is not at all sort of soft and to be dismissed. And so I really, really feel like I appreciate what you're offering here, Sharon, so much.
So wonderful. So thank you so much, Rhonda and Sharon, for commenting on how you're bringing in compassion and mindfulness into your practices. I'm curious in our last few minutes for all the panelists, everyone here can exercise a little bit of leadership. And when I think of leadership, I think of it as an action, right? It's not a position. It's something that you do, an issue that you care about, that you take action on. How are you thinking, or I guess if you could give advice to this audience, how can we all lead across difference to help us move forward towards that best case scenario?
I think we have a lot of power. I think most people in this room probably are in a position where they're leading groups of people, whether it's their families or their teams or their businesses or their neighborhoods. We all have the ability to kind of create these containers, and I think we need to really think about the power of that and the power of creating these containers in a way where support and challenge can coexist. So they're not just supportive and they're not just challenging so everyone feels in over their heads all the time, but there's the ability for support and challenge to really coexist. And I think if we have those in our neighborhoods, in our families, in our businesses, in our organizations, then that's a great training ground for people who will then go on to lead our country and our city and our state, and they'll walk into those roles having had training and practice in that rich art of working together. It's because it's messy and it's complicated, but we need to think about our own kind of sphere of influence and how we can create those in the containers that we have, control over now.
Great.
Let me just very briefly follow up just to say, because you talked about it being messy and difficult, and it is, and it's also joyful. I mean, I wouldn't be here and wouldn't be so committed to this if I hadn't seen the way that people who are sort of supported in doing this difficult and challenging work actually then find each other on a real honest human plane. And so you've got the Muslim student who can fight to the end for an African-American male professor to get a position when we don't have any other on the faculty. There is a joy that comes from that I think that's the story I want us to be telling about how we reach that engaged point in 2, 8, 10 years, our children's future. It's through telling the story of the joy of connection. And that is what I believe is really the heart of this difficult moment of childbirth. We are moving to a different level. Our democracy sort of actually needed this moment. And I think that if we talk about this and practice it in ways that help us manifest the way that connection brings joy and brings life, then I think we really can't fail, because this is the way of the future.
Wonderful.
Amen. Actually, your comment, two pieces of advice, but your comment brought to mind what you brought up as well, which is this can be uncomfortable. Joyful, yes, but also the uncomfortableness, I think, is something that rather than feel afraid of or scared of, the advice is to embrace it, and I think everyone can hear that, but again, especially being in Silicon Valley or the Bay Area, it's so easy to have this become its own echo chamber. And I was in Arizona, Utah, Boston, and New York 2 weeks ago, and just, again, reinforcing that message of going out and traveling, seeing different places, engaging in human-to-human interactions. I loved the H2H that came up earlier today in terms of all the different acronyms, B2B, B2C, C2C. It's all H2H, right? It's all human-to-human. That's business. That's life. That's what we're all here to go do. So embrace that discomfort. in whatever way makes sense to you. And then the second is more for people that are in the tech community in particular. But one construct that we've started using at Gusto is it's very easy to get caught up in first-order impact to what we build. So that can be how many users you have, how many customers, how much engagement, or if you're in a social media company, how much page view, how much monetization. And yes, that's important from a business standpoint, but there's a whole second-order question there that I think when you start broaching it, like how does my product impact the way a democracy functions? How does my product impact the way humans, live life? You start opening up a whole other set of discussion topics that are actually really fruitful, really rewarding. This is the optimist part of me. I get asked a lot, what is my current point of view on the role tech will play in this whole puzzle? And I'm an optimist. I think there's a lot of really amazing people in this community who have really good intent, and there's been something lost in translation over the last 10, 15 years. And I think unearthing that second-order impact is a path to actually start accomplishing both, being a solid business, but also thinking about how you impact the world in a more profound way, especially given how much power is concentrated inside this environment.
Yeah. And Sharon, in our last minute,
You've
your advice.
lifted my spirits. Wow. I'm more dystopian than you. But it's great. I am actually grateful every hour of every day that I have some tools that can help me look for the joy and sit with ambiguity and sit with some very painful feelings and sit with not knowing. And so in that gratitude, I continue to try to offer those tools. It doesn't have to be those same tools, but I would hope that everybody reaches out for some very practical, direct ways that they can really strengthen that kind of perspective.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you all. And I think from the chickens, the human-to-human travel and interactivity, engaging in joyful, thinking of the work as joyful, and being open to our own self-compassion, compassion, love for others. I think we've all learned some good things that we can take forward. So thank you so much to our wonderful panelists. Yeah. And everyone, please say happy birthday to Josh. It's his birthday today.
Couldn't think of a better place to be.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Josh. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
And your wife's bringing you flowers.
No way.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to our panel. Before we begin, I want to ask everyone here a question. We're going to do a little bit of a poll. Let me take you back in time to February 2016. So rewind back in time with me 1 year. And you can answer this question with your thumb. How much did you predict the state of our political discourse today? Thumbs up if you predicted it. Thumbs down if you're maybe a little surprised, maybe a little in denial. Yeah. So I can see a lot of us are a little bit surprised, right? Drop down now into your body in the present moment, here in your seat. What's one word that captures how you feel towards that best case scenario? So Josh, let's begin with you. Reflecting on your own leadership, what are you personally taking away and learning?
Yeah, so it's a true pleasure to be here. We were just chatting right before about this specific venue. And for those of you that don't know, this actually used to be the Exploratorium, where as a child growing up in the Bay Area, I would come to discover and learn about science. There's a beauty and symmetry to today it being a place to learn about a different part of the brain, perhaps a less logical part, but one that is just as meaningful. My remarks are going to be really framed around this idea of how much of a privilege we have here and how grateful I am to use this platform. I run a company with 400 people. We have 40,000 small businesses using Gusto across the country. But this privilege, this responsibility to actually have an opinion and actually kind of enable my team to go take action. So when some of the news happened around something that I would deem not a political topic, but a human topic around immigration, We were excited as a company to take action. We have a program to help folks donate from their pay stubs. So think of, again, the power of recurring donations to nonprofits. So we actually gave all 40,000 companies on Gusto a call to action, a reminder that that was there, but also that we would match any donation to the ACLU across those entire companies. And what was really exciting about it, and I think this is what we're going to dive into, was that a debate or discussion inside the company. I think growing up and being part of the Silicon Valley community, going to Stanford, studying engineering, there's a lot of different stereotypes you can associate with my background. It's fascinating.
About the state of our political discourse, how we talk to each other, the tone of the conversation. Just think about that for a second. Now I'd like you to fast forward in time. 1 year from now, February 2018. We're back here at Wisdom 2.0, 12 months have passed. Worst case scenario, we're maybe even more divided, more siloed. Best case scenario, more people are getting involved. People are listening. People are inquiring. Imagine what your best case scenario would be for 2018. What's your best case scenario? Well, we have 4 wonderful panelists here who are going to help us think through how to take action and practice compassion.
Not just get caught up in political ideology debates, but what does it mean to follow your core values? And for that, I'm going to give a little bit of personal background about myself. Born and raised here, but my parents are not from here. My mother is from Bolivia, came to the US when she was 18 to learn a new language, create a new life. My father is from a small steel town outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Also, both my mother and father were the first in their families to go to college, came to San Francisco, and became teachers. My dad was a high school teacher in San Francisco and then taught at San Quentin Prison for 10 years. And so I think of this discussion around entrepreneurship, which relates to me, and also this idea of what role technology has to play, technology community, in these broader discussions as framed against that backdrop, which is just how grateful I am for their sacrifice and for what they did to give me this opportunity to share my voice, share my opinion.